Welcome to City Roundtable. This is where we go in depth on city issues and things that are important to our citizens, staff, and community of Bremerton. Today we're going to talk about budgeting and the City of Bremerton's budget. And who better to have with us today than Andy Parks, our Financial Services Director, and Nick Wofford, who is Chair of our Budget Finance Committee. Andy, of course, is the expert on the money and knows where it all is. And Nick is taking this opportunity to really talk to citizens about how the city's budget is built, where the money goes, and how we determine how much money is spent where. And there are certain mandates. So first of all, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So Nick, what is it you want to talk to the folks about? Let's hear your Budget 101.
Okay, and thank you for having us here. And what we're going to talk about today is really applicable not only to the city of Bremerton as far as income, but also to the citizens of Paulsbo, Bainbridge Island, Port Orchard.
Absolutely.
Because the percent of revenue that we get from various sales tax, et cetera, is applicable to those issues also. We have our budget book here, which is available in your public library and is also online. Interesting reading, believe it or not. You can learn an awful lot. Put it on your pillow if you check it out at night, and osmosis, and you'll get it.
That's great. That's a big, thick book.
Yes, yes. But it's got, ordinances, staffing, general fund, enterprise funds, all those things that make up how much money we get and where it all goes. Not a lot of fine line, bottom line detail, but the general thing we want to talk about today is where your money comes from and how we generally spend it or allocate it.
The big picture.
The big picture. People like to use the 20,000 foot level looking down. Here's where it is.
And let's get right into it. Tell us, where does the money come from?
Well, we have four big areas that money comes from. Everybody talks about property tax. I'm losing it here. Property tax, sales tax, gas tax, and help me, Andy, without looking at my book.
You've got the business and occupancy tax, private utility tax, and those are your major general fund sources. Although the gas tax mentioned earlier, that's going to be dedicated to street maintenance and so forth in a separate fund. But yeah, those are the major sources of tax revenue. And then additionally, there's intergovernmental transfer payments. Those would be monies from the state or the federal government, and also, say, other local jurisdictions such as the county, et cetera, that feed into the general fund. And then we do have charges for services.
Right, and that's getting down into the small percentages of our income. But property tax is one of the major, everybody talks about, I always pay too much in my property tax, or I pay an awful lot, and we all do.
And we all do, we know that. So we're talking about the big four. Let's talk about, one more time, the four areas of revenue. Andy, can you repeat those, please?
Sure. I think, taxes in a variety of formats, intergovernmental revenue, licenses and permits, charges for services. Those are the big key ones. And then there's other smaller groups, but in general,
that's where the city gets its money to spend.
Right.
Those four.
General fund oriented.
General fund. Who's in the general fund, Nick? What departments in our city are in the general fund?
Police, fire, admin, that's it. Parks a little bit. But your water, your sewer, your stormwater are all enterprise funds. So the money you pay into those, all separate, and they cannot be used for anything except those particular utilities.
Police, fire, parks, admin.
Yes.
Those are our general funds.
Yeah, community development is also
community
in there.
development.
They're a small portion.
Compared to police or fire.
Yes, and personnel or public safety takes about 60% of that.
That was going to be my next question. Let's talk about the pie and where it goes.
Well, You want to talk about general fund or?
General fund.
Okay. General fund, we get approximately $38 million in our general fund every year. Approximately $30 million of that goes to police and fire. So that leaves us $8 million to take care of your parks, and you can figure roughly $200,000 a park on a yearly basis. So the rest of the personnel all has to take care of that $8 million. Funded primarily by now sales tax. When sales tax goes down, revenue goes down, and we have to make some tough decisions on what are we going to do with our money.
$38 million, $30 million for public safety, which is police and fire.
Yes.
Leaves us $8 million for community development,
Yes.
admin, parks.
Yes.
$8 million divided by 3,
Oh, you can throw a little street in there too, but
a little bit, $2 million each department roughly. And I know that's 2.3 or so. That's not a lot of money. Because we have a lot of folks that, bodies that have to come out of that money.
yes, and we've cut down on our personnel. Last year, when we first felt this decrease, we cut about 8 people out. This year, we're trying to do things, because when you cut people, like right now, we close the city offices on Friday. That's to allow the people that man the desks time to catch up on the other items that were postponed during the week because we've had to let some people go.
Is that going to be carried over into next year, Andy?
And the current budget contemplates, for proposed budget for next year does include maintaining the office closure on Fridays. As Nick just mentioned, staffing wise, there's been reduction, and it's and it's been a fairly stable number, and has been reduced, I believe, from around 360 down to around 340 citywide. So it's been a sizable reduction in workforce over the past 12 months. Is that projected to continue on and continue to see those types of reductions? I think it's a little early to tell. We're continuing to look for ways to save money in personnel, and readers may have recently read about the early separation incentives that are being offered, and those are put in place to see if we can't find ways to ultimately replace higher earning staff with more, or should say less costly staffing or other solutions. And those are going to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. But recognize too, the budget that Nick just mentioned, that was what we had projected and budgeted to begin the year with. The real numbers now, I mean, after kind of for the impacts of what's happened at the national and ultimately local level as it relates to the recession, it's much closer to, say, around 34.3 million coming in, and expenditures have been reduced ultimately around to $35.8 million from again a number close to 38 million. So there's still a gap, and we're still working to close that gap in a variety of ways, including additional pilot, and including seeking and securing additional grants, but then also continuing to look for ways to reduce the spending. Because
What is a pilot?
The pilot is a payment in lieu of taxes, and this is a fee that is charged back to the city utilities that is comparable to the fees that are being assessed to the private utilities, the natural gas, the cable, the electrical, et cetera. Those all pay a tax to the city that goes into their general fund on their sales, and that's one of those areas that we mentioned earlier. So the pilot is a comparable type of fee charged to entities that are, say, non-taxable.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
Let's take sales tax, one of our major drivers as far as income. The current rate for the area is 8.6%. Okay, the city of Bremerton gets 0.85%.
Of that 8.6.
Yes.
Say that again.
So we get about a tenth of your 8.6.
A tenth comes to the city.
Comes to the city. The same with your property tax. We get about 20% of every dollar that you pay in your property tax. The city, the county, library, EMS, all these things take up the rest of your money. So when you pay a lot of taxes, you're absolutely right. You pay a lot of taxes, but the portion that comes to the city, and this applies to all the cities, is relatively small in relationship to the total bill.
Andy, you mentioned that realistically we're looking at 2010 at 34 million, 34.5 maybe. As we listen to national news and other financial experts, so to say, they're saying we're coming out of this. Things are getting better. Houses are moving. People are buying things. When are we going to see that realistically? Or is it realistically? And I know that's asking you to look in your crystal ball. Is it going to be 2012, 11, 12, 13?
Yeah, there's also a lot of people that are saying those things aren't happening quite yet. And certainly there's a sense that maybe the bottom of the recession is taken place. There's also, I think, concern of going into a double dip recession. I know a lot of folks that are still been able to make the mortgage payments and so forth, but maybe don't have a job and their unemployment, their other sources of income are running out, and now they're becoming at a stress point. So I think this has a ways to go, and certainly from a budgetary perspective, what we've taken I think an approach on is we do not expect to see any strong recovery. We expect this to kind of tick up a little bit, but not to be say a 5, 6, 7% instant surge in activity, and we certainly haven't seen that. On the autos, yes, there was good sales during the Cash for Clunkers program, but there's also a lot of news out right now that now those same places are not seeing much action whatsoever. So I think there's a long way to go before all this is known. I think we're going to be cautiously optimistic, plan for I think more on the lower end of things, and be able to grow out of it versus it is very difficult to make decisions to to downsize further, and so plan on it being on the lower end of things and then be able to come up as resources become more available. But it's a very tough, and what's happening on a national level is not necessarily what's happening locally. The unemployment rate locally, fortunately, is much better than what it is on a national level, but that still has not translated into increased spending. In just on the sales tax, Nick mentioned earlier, it's a big piece of our budget. Well, that's down over 16% year to date relative to where it was a year ago. Will it stay at 16% less? We're hoping it is going to be trending up to maybe be down only 10%. But that's still down to where it was before, and the organization had grown consistent with its resources, and those resources again are down pretty much across the board.
I think we're seeing people in our community that are underemployed.
Yes.
They might have had a really nice job, $30,000, $40,000 a year that they've lost. They're working at the McDonald's and the Burger King and trying to support their family. We hear a lot from food banks and organizations like KCR that offer assistance in paying your utility bills. There's a lot more need of food and shelter and for utility help as well.
Yes, and we're very conscious of, on a countywide basis, the city of Bremerton is one of the, as far as income goes, ranks at the bottom. So we're real conscious of that, and we try to provide through utilities some lower rates for the disadvantaged, and we're try to keep our rate increases as low as we can, consistent with trying to maintain the existing infrastructure that we have. But this $4 million deficit is a projected deficit. And by the end of the year, when we come in December to approve the budget, it will be balanced. Not a problem. I mean, it's going to be a problem getting there, but it will be balanced by the end of the year.
So when I pay my water bill to the city of Bremerton, does any of the utility bill, it's called utility bill because it's wide, does any of it go to the general fund?
No.
Where does that money
No.
go?
All that money goes to, they're called enterprise funds. And the water, the sewer, the stormwater, all go to maintaining those particular utilities. By law, we cannot go into the general fund. Now, yes, there's some franchise taxes and other things that we get, but your water bill goes to the water department.
Well, we've got a tough road, and you know, we fared fairly well in 2009. I think our city employees really stepped up and provided concessions to the city. I think our overall feeling in staff is we want people to have jobs.
Yes.
We want to keep people working. Concessions were necessary and I think very forthcoming. As we go into the next year, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yes, and we're going to continue to work on the economic development so we develop more jobs, more sales tax coming in, and everybody benefits.
Everybody benefits. Andy, any closing thoughts?
Well, as Nick mentioned, you know, the projection right now is for a $4 million budget, and what we're attempting to do is to, in balancing that, is to use a balanced approach to it, to find some additional revenues where we can without, you know, or minimizing any impacts on rates, and also reducing in a planned approach, an organized, not reactive approach, reduce our spending in, you know, strive to find a place that is ultimately going to be sustainable should the recovery, you know, take much longer than what might otherwise be the case. And then we'll see where this thing's go. But it's a little bit longer look at things than just a 1 year. And it's, you know, looking out into 2011, a little bit into 2012 as well. And, you know, certainly look for, you know, individuals that, you know, have an interest in this. You know, Nick mentioned earlier, you know, this information is all available out on the website. It's also available at the library. If you have an interest in this, certainly the counselors would love to hear from you, staff would love to hear from you, and there are a number of public hearing opportunities.
Excellent.
You know, to have your opinions, you know, heard.
And we love to hear from the public. Believe it or not, we really do like that feedback.
Well, that's why we have open government, because we
Yes.
certainly want to hear from folks. And the city's website is www.ci.bremerton.wa.us. Councilman Wofford and his 8 constituents that serve on our Bremerton City Council, you can reach them at 473-5280.
Correct.
In that office. Andy's phone number, since he's the king of numbers for our city, 473-5722. As Andy and Nick just mentioned, there will be public hearings on the budget, and that is the public's chance for your input on our city budget. So check out the beautiful budget Bible, we call it, on the city's website.
Only weighs
You
a
can
couple
look at
pounds.
it. It's only a few pounds. You can look at it on the city's website, and keep checking on this because it is important to all of us in the city that receive services and live in the city, and we'll keep abreast of all the information. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short break, and we're going to bring Phil Williams in. He's our Public Works Director. We're going to be talking about the street funds. That's a fun topic. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to City Roundtable. We're talking Budget 101 with our City Councilman Nick Wofford, who is he is chair of our City Finance Committee. And joining us now is Phil Williams. Phil's the director of our Public Works Department, huge department in our city. But along with budgeting, we want to talk about how do the streets get funded? very important issue in our city, and I think we'll start with gas tax facts. Gas tax facts. Say that three
Very
times.
nice.
Because that predominantly has been giving us some revenue. Phil, why don't you start with that?
Certainly, and I think it's a good place to start because as we go out and talk to the public, very often I think they're under the impression that the lion's share of the funding we have to spend on our city street system comes from gas tax. And they're familiar with that because every time they buy a gallon of gas, they pay about 54.4 cents on each gallon in gas tax, which
And gas is up to almost $3 a gallon again.
Yeah.
yes, right now as we're airing this, I think we're between $2.90 and $3 a gallon. It's been up as high as about $4.50 locally, and it's been down as low as
remember that.
$1.75 within the last year too.
And we
But
were all happy about the $1.75.
that was
Weren't we
nice.
ecstatic?
But independent of
What the price is.
retail price for gasoline is, the tax is static at this 54 cents. And of that amount, 18.4 cents actually goes to the federal government. That's a federal gas tax, goes to support the national highway system. And then the other 37.5 cents is state tax. And of that amount, of the total amount, the cities only get a little less than 3 cents.
Per gallon.
Per every gallon of gas you buy, the city gets 3 cents. Now, if you think about that, out of 54.4 cents, the city gets less than 3, and 60% of the citizens in the state live in cities. So we don't really do that well in terms of revenue from gas tax at the city level. That's still, however, a sizable amount of money each year. It's about $580,000 to $600,000 a year that we get in gas tax, but that's only about 20% of our budget. So it's a very nice thing to have. It's important, it's critical, but it certainly doesn't pay all the bills. And when I talk about that, those bills, just to remind people what our city street fund does, it certainly takes care of the street, and we maintain the pavement and the striping and the markers and the signage and the curbs and the gutters and the sidewalks, right-of-way maintenance, weed control, snow and ice control, sweeping. We do all of that inside of the street
Snow and ice
budget.
control was huge last winter.
Exactly, and it all
Huge.
comes at once.
Yeah.
In about
and
10 days, we spent our full budget.
I
for-
bet you did, and it didn't stop there, because
No.
we kept getting hit and hit and hit.
Correct.
But, and how do you never know how to
No.
predict that, but that's a whole side
Right.
conversation.
And bear in mind that, this 3 cents we get, as our vehicles get more economical, and as the price goes up, we cut back on the amount of gas we buy and the amount of driving. So this fund is slowly going down, the amount of revenue that we can anticipate.
Right. So next we wanted to talk about the effect of 695, which to a lot of us is the bad word.
And I know people are tired of hearing that. It
Right.
did happen some time ago, about the year 2000. But for streets, it became a really important issue, and it still is. We mentioned gas tax. That was money that flows to city from the state tax on gasoline. This is another source of revenue that came to cities to support street systems in the past, and 695 changed that. But if people can remember back, when you bought a new car, let's say $25,000, not an unreasonable figure for an average new car maybe, that would generate in its first year almost $600 in motor vehicle excise tax. 75% of that $600 was going to fund transportation programs in the state. So when they knocked that down to $30, everybody made out, and everybody was very happy about that. And I think we still are very pleased when we go in to license our car that it's only in that $40 to $50 range now. But that money was going to support transportation, and so cities took a big hit there too. If you think about that car over its lifespan perhaps of say 13 years, maybe an average lifespan for a new car, would have generated about $3,800 in motor vehicle excise tax over that time. Now, nobody wants to go back to those days, but still, that was a sizable chunk of money, whereas now we might pick up less than $600. So all that money sort of disappeared
Right.
from the transportation system.
Right.
And that's important. It really did kind of hamstring us on paving our city streets. A lot of the money we used to use to pave our city streets disappeared, and we really haven't been able to identify a new source of ongoing revenue to replace that.
Right, right. That's the problem. So the next graphic we have is the United States map, and we see Washington State is the 12th best for total business taxes, and is best.
Well, 15th best for total, oh,
I was
12th,
reading this,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And best meaning lowest.
yes.
And in Washington State, we're the 15th best for total state and local individual taxes. So our tax rate is low.
We still pay a lot.
We pay a lot, but
But
comparatively,
comparatively, we're well off.
I hear that quite a bit too, and I'm sure you do as well, Councilman. When you're out talking to the public, they think the tax structure here in Washington is just immensely unfair. They may not be familiar with how it is in other states, but it
Exactly.
just seems like a real burden here. And so the only purpose of this slide is just to kind of place state of Washington in a national context, and we're really not that bad. We're in the, say, best 1/3 to 1/4 of the states in the country.
we're getting down to just a couple minutes. Let's go through these next few slides relatively quickly if we can.
Well, this slide, which we're calling slide 4, I won't go into all the details, it takes a while, but it's just a graph that shows pavement deterioration over time, with time being the bottom axis there, starting when it was a brand new street. You just first put it down,
Right.
and then with tick marks at 5 years, 7 years, 12 years, and so on. And the pavement does deteriorate over time, at first rather slowly. It stays new, the pavement's got a lot of oil in it, it's flexible, and it doesn't crack. And then after about 5, 10 years, it begins to decline slowly and small cracks show up. And if you can jump on it right then with preventive maintenance money, you can extend its life. And so you see 3 different outcomes at the bottom. It can drop off in quality very quickly, or it can be extended if you make the appropriate expenses.
I'm sorry to rush you, but we're down to about 1 minute.
yeah,
And Nick, I was going to give you a chance to kind of wrap up for us. Streets are a huge concern for our city, and finding a funding source has been real hard. And
The council has been struggling with this for years, and right now the only solution we have is Proposition 1. So it's a case of we either improve our streets now or we let them deteriorate. A heck of an investment we have in them that we try to maintain.
we want folks, number one, to read Proposition 1, educate yourself, and above all, vote. Please vote. Phil, thanks so much for the fabulous information. Councilman Wofford, great job.
Thank you. I
Your
hope,
first time on BCAT, I believe, and
you know, if the public wants this, we can go and make a little more in-depth.
very good. You can contact Councilman Wofford or Director Phil Williams of Public Works through the city's website, www.ci.bremerton.wa.us. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for tuning in to City Roundtable.